onboarding new technologies, it's really kind of a nucleation event within a company or within an organization, right? It kind of starts with one, and then that one has to trigger the next three, and then that next three triggers the next five. And hopefully you kind of just get that knock-on effect. Analogy that springs to mind is kind of super cold water where you see it, you pop it, and all of a sudden it just all goes on, and you get this kind of rapid adoption. But in order to get that first little crystal there, it needs to be standout, and it needs to be a person that kind of has that pull and has that sway within the organization as well.
Really excited for today's episode. We have Jared Carlson-Stevermer on the line here with us. He's the Director of Research and Cell Therapy at Serenity. This conversation was really awesome. Had a chance to talk to all of our potential customers, the people that we try and sell to every day, and really get inside their head on how they like to work with salespeople. Nick, what'd you love in today's conversation?
Really interesting for me to hear about Jared's research and how he interacts and some of the crazy stuff that's gone on in his career. But yeah, really enjoyed chatting with him and hearing some of the gems of how he likes to interact with sales guys and commercial people and how they bring value.
Yeah, I think specifically around transparency, pricing, expectation setting, right? Basically, don't waste his time. I think these are all really key things that we're going to hear in today's episode. And then if you stay around till the end, you're going to get to hear about how he actually likes to get prospected to. So really great insights there. All right, without further ado, let's jump into the show. Hey, Jared, welcome to the podcast. Excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks. So excited to be here.
Awesome. So as you know, we ask the same question to everyone who joins. What's a crazy or funny story that's happened to you at some point in your career?
I mean, really, as scientists, most of our crazy or funny stories are just things that went absolutely wrong. You guys know from us all working together at Synthago, we're very automation heavy. And I just remember kind of in my first couple weeks there, using some of the Hamiltons, the big machines, they're millions of dollars. You don't want to screw them up. And just seeing a plate go careening across the entire thing, straight into the trash of a very important experiment. And you get that sinking feeling in your stomach. You just go, oh no. As it crashes against a wall and you have liquid spilling everywhere. And then, all of a sudden it's all contaminated. So fortunately, it's a good learning experience and you can look back at it being funny. But in the moment, it's kind of more crazy than it is funny.
Yeah. What part hurts the most? The fact that the experiment is gone or that you potentially break the Hamilton?
When it's your first month out of grad school. So fortunately, it's all self-contained, right? You're like, okay, I'm not going to lose my hand off of this. I had a mentor though that would just reach into it as you're all moving around. You're like, you're going to lose an arm. I think, the first month out of grad school though, you're like, oh, I'm going to lose my job. That's worth a couple years salary right there. What is going to happen to me? So after that, when you're like, okay, I'm conditioned, you're like, fine, it's my experiment, whatever. You get service engineers to take care of that. But in the moment, it was like, I can't tell anybody. I'm going to have to fix this myself.
Yeah. And I think the thing is as well, you don't realize how often this stuff happens when it first happens to you. So I used to work on cell culture automation, and I won't mention the robot because it used to crash all of the time. But the company would come in and they would refuse to call that a fault or a crash. They called it a feature. And they'd be like, oh, what features happened today? So we didn't ask. This is not a feature.
Right. That's the software thing, isn't it? Right there. Is it a feature or is it a bug? No. It planned to fail that way because you just did it wrong. Everybody's just taking this agile development, twisting and turning it to whatever they want it to be.
Oh, that's too good. Awesome. But yeah, really excited to have you here because one of the things that we really want to bring out in this podcast is we're trying to help all life science sales reps get better. And so we want to talk to potential customers, right? People on the receiving end of different sales conversations to find out what they like and what they don't like. So be curious, what do you look for when you're potentially searching for a product or service that you want to implement into your experiment or workflows?
Yeah, I mean, really the number one thing I look for is transparency, right? If there's a whole bunch of hoops that I have to jump through to try to get a quote from somebody, if I have to go through 7 layers of service to figure out what the pricing of something is or what it actually does, it kind of turns me off to the entire process. I mean, I know you guys are sales, it's kind of what you do, but having a click interface that I can go through and I can figure out what exactly I need. And as I need it, I have support to try to work with it. That makes me want to build that relationship. That makes me want to reach out to people to figure out what else we can do to start to expand the relationship. But if it's kind of like, oh, you need to buy this one thing, to buy this second thing, to buy this third thing in order to even make it work, I'm kind of like, well, give me the all-in-one solution. Tell me how I can get from point A to point B without having to go to 1A to 2A to bounce all the way back and forth. To me, that really starts to build a great relationship and wants me to continue to build the relationship with that company and that supplier.
Do you look to the sales rep to help provide some of that guidance?
Oftentimes I definitely do. It's a lot of times it'll be, I have an idea of what I want to do. And I kind of know that the sales rep is the first line there to be like, hey, does this work? Is this possible? Is this something that we can create? Kind of being in the, my role is much more in the R&D side rather than process development. And so oftentimes what that means is I need things that aren't necessarily going to be offered. I need things that are kind of off the wall, or, hey, can you help me? Can I somehow hack your products to make it to do this? And I think that's where the reps really come in handy is they like, hey, what other stuff have you seen in the field? What other stuff have you seen other customers doing? Have you seen like it's gotten it to work this way, right? I don't need a 100% guarantee that it's going to work the first time, every time. That would be great. But I also know that kind of a lot of times what I'm doing is off spec, and let's come up with a solution for the ways that we can make this work.
Great. I want to ask you something, because you said transparency and you mentioned price, and I've managed a lot of sales teams, and something the reps do that I hate. I've probably given too much away here, but I want your opinion on it. And often what they'll do is they think by holding back on pricing and waiting until you're really interested, then that's going to be fine. You'll pay the price because I waited and it was worth the effort. Is that kind of thing ever going to work on a scientist or in that buying process?
Generally not for me, right? Like I kind of want to be upfront. If you guys have the machine that I need, or if you guys have the consumables I need, I want to know what I'm getting into. If you're holding back and then, I have to go to my purchasing department or I have to go off to make sure that we have the budget for that. And we don't know that until 2-3 months down the road. We've done a site install. We've done a bunch of testing. We've, all these different sorts of things. We tried to work out the kinks, and then it comes back and it's out of budget, or my CEO blanks and he's like, no, we're going to have to wait till Q3. Like, we just both wasted all of our time, right? There was absolutely no reason that we needed to do the song and dance to get to this point where it's like, oh, actually this isn't workable. Kind of along those lines, you'll see times too where it's like, hey, this is the price, but if we figure out yada yada yada, we can maybe do a 5% discount. Like give me first price, best price. We're scientists. We're not on the sales side. We're not negotiators. We're bad communicators. As much as we like to write patents and everything, most of us are gun shy when it comes down to talking to people. Don't try to give me that whole upsell or the like, oh, I'm giving you a deal. Like, if that's what it is, that's what it is, and we'll just move forward off of that. I think it's all about working in good faith with each other for the betterment of the field.
Yes, it's the answer I wanted, so I'm pleased.
I love the.
Nick's like, oh yeah, that's exactly where I was leading you to go. So as long as you manage to follow the breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
But I think it's important, though, in general, it's like the transparency component, whether it's price, whether it's like what a product or service is actually capable of, right? Sort of the expectation setting is the last thing you want is somebody to promise some sort of deliverable or something that you think is going to work every time or in a certain way, and then it fails. Or it's not because like the experiment failed, it's because the promise was over delivered. And so it's like that transparency. I mean, you talk about this, you mentioned you're an R&D. So a lot of the stuff you do is like trial and error, trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. So like failing is okay, but you want to fail not based on the expectations or promises that somebody gave you. It's like the experimental validity of failure, if that makes sense.
I want to fail because I had a bad idea or it didn't work. I don't want to fail because, well, granted, maybe I'm an idiot and I just slammed a plate against the wall in automation or something like that. If it's a personal fault, I can understand that, but I want everything else to just be, kind of working successfully, that I don't have to troubleshoot anything else.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. One thing that might be helpful for the listeners would be maybe a little background on kind of your role. Like, how do you think about the landscape of like R&D for what you're focused on, and then where do products and services kind of fit into that landscape?
Yeah, so just little background about my role. I'm the director of R&D at Srodny. We're a small startup company currently located in JLabs, focusing on CAR T research, essentially building gigantic libraries of tens of thousands of different CAR molecules that can then hopefully have better effectiveness against solid tumors in a clinical setting. And so we're really kind of out there. And so our needs are very all over the place. And so it's helpful to have a kind of a grounding area. We're products and services all over the place. We like to keep a lot of things in-house. And so at that point, it's not so much working with services, but I guess really we do work with services to kind of go end to end. I know I'm just speaking over myself completely here, so reel me back in when I get off topic. But all along the value stack is we're working on building libraries of DNA. We have a partner for that. We're working on building, primary T cells. We have a partner for that. And getting everybody to work in lockstep is really important to us, and having them focus on their deliverables and having them all work together. Now, unfortunately for us, there's not kind of a full stack development partner that can help us along the way. Probably that's a good thing, because then we wouldn't be a research organization anymore. But, and then I think kind of the next step in our development is moving that forward to somebody that can take our protocols and move it into, a CDMO type scenario. And that's really kind of the next step of growth for a company, is somebody that can work with us and partner with us and learn from us in terms of what we're doing, and then also take us to the next step. So how can we have a service partner that does what we do better than what we do, because they have more time or resources or anything else like that, while still sticking to the core technologies that we've developed?
Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. If you could do us a quick favor and share it with someone you know, it would mean the world to us. If you want to uplevel your sales skills or just network with other life science sales reps, check out the Succession community at succession.bio/join. Okay, now back to the show. And so when you go then to say, okay, we've got this particular need, maybe you're coming up on a different experiment, how do you kind of go and do the research side to understand what it is that you need to maybe buy, whether if it's different consumables, different reagents, to then you kind of get where I'm going with this? It's like, how do you kind of start that search process once you know what you're going for?
A lot of it goes off of, what have we used in the past? What has been successful? After that, it's kind of what has been worked on in literature, or what is also kind of being put out by some of the larger players that are in the game. Do we have a partner that's doing it? Is there a Johnson & Johnson? Is there a BMS? Is there a Genentech that they have a published protocol that we can kind of follow in their footsteps and try to match our processes, such that it'd be easier if we ever want to take this into a CRO that then they've already done this process, who's doing the manufacturing for it. And then after that, it's also kind of internal benchmarking, working with a couple of different suppliers, a couple of different vendors to figure out what gives the best results in our process. We've kind of gone through this optimization recently, even of how do we maximize CAR T cell expansion? It's a very, very general process. There are many different suppliers. Everybody does it their own different way. But I think, as you guys are probably aware as well, there's a little bit of black magic to cell culture. It's a lot more art than science than I think a lot of people are probably willing to admit. And it's all about what works best for your group, and how do you get consistent results at that point? And so it's all about that kind of trial and error. You do your sort of benchmarking studies to make sure it works. And if you want to switch, you have to have that sort of bridging to make sure, hey, yes, this is actually going to work in our hands and we're going to be able to do it. What for us has really become most important is repeatability. Do we have the same results over and over and over again? Or even could we be pleasantly surprised every once in a while to get better than what we were expecting?
One question I have for people in your position and working with vendors and reps and stuff, how often is it that you think I need something and I go out and look for it, versus somebody's come to me with a great solution that I didn't know existed? So if you look at those two kind of scenarios, what's more common?
I think a lot of times there's a bunch of inertia going on in the scientific field, right? If it's not broke, don't fix it. And also, like, this is kind of what I have used in the past, and it has been successful for me. And so a lot of scientists kind of get stuck in their own ways. And in order to get them to change lanes a little bit, it's going to have to take a lot of pushing, a lot of pulling, and a lot of convincing. And that's probably where the reps come in and say, if you guys have a very clear use case of, competitor A versus competitor B, and I know you can never name names, but say we're doing this and it does markedly different, right? If it's like, hey, we're within 1.5x to, somewhere around those, it's probably not going to move the needle, because that there's also going to be a quarter's worth of optimization to try to really get it off the ground. If the reps come in and say, hey, we're willing to work with you, and this is probably not the way it's going to be, but we'll supply the materials for you to try it once, try it head to head against your own process and see how it works, with well-defined protocols that you don't have to work, you don't have to do anything. It's kind of more plug and play. It's more, let's build a Lego set. Let's go step 1 to step 2 to step 3. And it's not going to add up, but it's not this, I don't need a brand new machine to do it as well, because that's going to be another barrier, at least on the consumable side. I think you'd get a lot more adoption there. And that's where working with the rep is very helpful, to say, hey, we have a brand new technology out. Maybe you want to try it. Maybe you want to test it in your processes to see how it works. When I go off and I kind of do a de novo search of what else is out there, it's because something isn't working well, right? We've identified a huge problem in our process. And that's where I'm kind of like, all right, we're not going to go forward with competitor A. Let's move over to competitor B, because their lot-to-lot variation, or competitor A, their lot-to-lot variation has been atrocious recently, or we can't get these turnaround times down. We have to be thinking 3 months ahead instead of 2 months ahead, and that's when we go to the other ones. And so I think that's kind of the balance that I find between when I'm going out to looking for something versus when I'm kind of more receptive to, incoming ideas. I think especially in kind of the car field, people have tested a lot of the various different solutions out there, and they've found their niche, and they know that it works with their workflow and they can time it out. And so unless there's a massive improvement, generally it's hard to make those kind of shifts.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I heard a couple things that I want to try and repeat that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's some really good nuggets you gave us, which is, one, give your customer a chance to try something, right? It sounds like you already have baselines of performance for a lot of things that you're already doing. And so if I'm a rep and I want to give you an opportunity to test this new product or technology that we have, I should try and, for whatever way I can, give you access to it for free to test it, but understanding your baseline. And so then we can have a discussion, okay, where are you at today? What kind of results are you getting? What can we get you to? But then there's that big gap that you said, which is it has to be a big difference. It can't just be this very minuscule difference that's going to make us go back and change our protocol and really disrupt everything that we're doing just to bring in this new technology. It has to be marketably different to say that this value that this new product is bringing is going to greatly enhance our workflows. Because then there's also the added cost of time on your end to figure this stuff out, and potentially even training on your end to train other people on the team and whatnot, which is added cost to the cost of the product. So it's not just the product cost, it's the cost of the time and effort and energy.
Right. And I think that's a really great idea. It's a really great point too, because it is it's not just that you have to convince the one person then needs to go and convince everybody else, hey, this protocol that you've been doing for the past 18 months, throw it away. We're going to go back to development and figure it all out. And so a team like mine, that's a lot easier to do, right? We're a very small company. We don't have a whole bunch of, it's the Silicon Valley, break things fast and just move on. But if you have a larger, or even a mid-sized company where you have a development team that's all running this protocol, you can't have two separate production methods. That just, at the end of the day, that's not going to work. And if you want to go to a therapeutic type thing, you have to get that changes in early into the development process, or you have to hope for the next program that they want to change it because program 1 is already out the door. Program 2 is out the door. It's IND enabling experiments. You're not changing all that much at that point. It's got to be earlier in the process that you say like this is a market change, and then even at that point too, it's supporting it all the way up. In our world, at least for the therapeutic, it's got to go all the way up, right? If it's something that I'm going to have to do the R&D at this early stage, but then if I want to go into a phase 1 type study and I have to change everything, that's a big burden, and that's a huge kind of track change that needs to be considered as well.
So do you look at then some of the things that you're going to have to implement in phase 1 or whatever, or when you transfer to like a CDMO, do you look at some of those things first when you're evaluating R&D, like reagents and whatnot that you might use, because that way you have a more scalable approach?
Yeah, so I would say my mind, discovery can be very kind of loosey-goosey, right? If you're in the very early processes, you say, we just need to fill our pipeline. What works? How do we get it to work? I don't care how we have to slam it into our cells, because at that point, the biology is the biology, right? We could be using Gen 2 lentivirus, which is never, ever, ever going to go into clinic, but it infected the T cells that we needed to. And there, you could probably get a variety of different opinions across the industry, but kind of as you start to move into preclinical in vivo type studies is where I want to start thinking about how do you actually get this transferable? How do you start using reagents that are more likely to scale from RUO to GMP-like to GMP, and how do you keep that all kind of in-house so you know exactly what's happening with your different suppliers? I think that probably varies from organization to organization, but that's kind of the, we potentially have a good candidate. Let's make sure that we don't screw this up as we move on down the line.
I think at some point we're going to have to apologize to Jared, because we're literally telling, hopefully, if this is popular, a load of sales reps exactly how to sell to you. And now they're going to abuse that. And you're going to be endless emails and phone calls of people knowing exactly how to sell their technology to you. Which is, I was just running over that thinking this is really amusing.
I'm pretty good at that delete button, though. So,
Although, to be fair, if they do their job well, then they actually make Jared's job better too. So
exactly. Then they go through the filter and it's like, oh, that was actually successful.
Yeah, there you go. So that's the hope that we have here, is we actually can up level all reps so they do a better job. One thing that you mentioned is sort of this concept of like selling that idea internally. Is right. It's like, hey, I want to introduce this new technology. Okay, great. Now, how do you actually do that internally? Because I just had a conversation with somebody about this, and this person that they were referencing had to not only sell their new technology they wanted to bring into their group, they had to sell the value of their group to the broader company as well. So there's I think there's this process of scientists not thinking they're also selling, but when even internally, you are also selling like your ideas, your concepts, you want to bring in a new technology, use a new protocol, like you have to sort of sell this concept internally.
Yeah. If there's one thing scientists are really bad at, it's selling themselves. I think you can see that at any poster session, at pretty much any major conference of like, oh no, this isn't that important. It's like, there almost needs to be a marketing class for every single PhD level grad student. Just in how to do it. But you're right. I think, in onboarding new technologies it's really kind of a nucleation event within a company or within an organization, right? It kind of starts with one, and then that one has to trigger the next three, and then that next three triggers the next five, and hopefully you kind of just get that knock-on effect. Analogy that springs to mind is kind of super cold water, where you see it, you pop it, and all of a sudden it just all goes on, and you get this kind of rapid adoption. But in order to get that first little crystal there, it needs to be standout, and it needs to be a person that kind of has that pull and has that sway within the organization as well.
But yeah, we typically will call them on the sales side, we call them champions. Okay. So you have your champion on the other side. But it's interesting because there's also the term called a coach. So a coach is somebody who can give you all the information internally and can give you all the details that you need to go and sell, but they don't have necessarily the power or influence to make it happen. So a true champion is somebody who has that power and influence to go talk to, whoever the different decision makers are, is go talk to all the different people that might be involved in the decision. And so it's really important to build a champion.
Yeah. I love that we're talking to scientists, and most people will go with the wording of a snowball effect, but you went with supercooled water and the point of nucleation, right? That is exactly what you should have chose over the simple phrase of snowball effect. That's why it's so fun to talk to scientists more than sales guys, right?
I should have gone simple and I should have gone to snowball, but no, I just had to up level it for no apparent reason there. So thanks for pointing that one out. That'll probably got a lot simpler when why do simple when complicated?
That's awesome.
Nice.
So I think we're getting up close to time. So we want to end with one question here for you, Jared, which is, if there's one thing sales reps should stop doing, what is it? And I say one thing because I'm sure you got a list, but yeah.
No, I'll erase my whiteboard over here that I had all the checklist of things I wanted to talk about. I mean, the one thing, to me, it's always a little bit disingenuous when it's like, oh, hey, we have this great new thing, and it's like, it's a gas chromatography, right? For us, like, we don't do that. Understand kind of the if you're gonna cold calling is fine. I understand it's completely part of the role, but do a little bit of research behind it too. I don't need 17 emails that's going to sell me on the benefits of HPLC if we don't look like we do a chemistry lab. I don't need an ACTA like that. It's just not the kind of thing that I do. And so kind of that, the understanding and the vetting of the company and understanding that there's a good match to provide value, I think is a lot more valuable, right? Because even, I've seen it in previous roles where, and because scientists will take that on too. Like they'll be like, oh, I saw this company in the past. They just kept reaching out to me about something that there's absolutely no reason that I'm going to do. As I move to a new company, maybe I'm going to work on these kind of things. It's possible for us to change discipline, but like their lack of attention to detail has kind of turned me off to them in the past. So therefore, when they reach out this time with something that actually might make a difference, I'm not like, oh, yes, I want to give you guys a shot, because I don't think that you really know or care what I do, but are more just looking for that market opportunity or that next opportunity to sell, rather than kind of what I really look for is that partnership and how do we grow this together and continue to have a good relationship.
Yep. We see so much spray and pray messaging, right? Like, I'm going to make a list and I'm going to go send them the same message and I'm going to hope that something works. And I think the sad part is historically it would work, right? You would get responses to these types of messages, but now everybody is immune to it because everybody's doing it. And so you have to do something different to stand out. I think you highlighted something really important here, which is doing relevant research on the company, on the person, to see, first off, does it even make sense for me to reach out to this person? And if so, how can I tailor a message that's relevant to them based on whatever my product or service is?
Right, exactly. And, honestly, it probably puts a lot of effort into tailoring every individual message. And so a form letter it's okay. If it's got a little bit in there, it's worth a little bit more. If it's got a data set, it's like, oh, I might actually look at that. Here's a white paper or something else like that. But it really is, to me, the like, you pulled my information off of something, you put in a very generic, like whatever the percent name is that fills it in, and then didn't even sign it. And I just know, I'm like, I have no problem with deleting this, because I know that the effort put into it was you clicked a form on Salesforce and hit send to message list, and then just hope for that maybe like 0.5% response rate or one person to respond that you got something. And so it's like that tailoring and that knowing of the subject matter is makes a lot of difference to me. I mean, that actually brings up kind of the second thing that I want is, a lot of people sometimes there's sales reps that will, and it's the strangest thing, you'll get sales reps that almost talk down to you, like you don't know your own field. And it's like, I've been in this for long enough to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. I know what I'm doing. I know the questions that I'm asking. Don't respond to my question like I've got no idea. There's a very specific reason why I'm trying to lead you on to this pathway to be like, hey, can it do this? And if you're just like, oh, I don't even know why you'd want to do that. It's like, okay, you know your subject field a little bit better. You don't have to match necessarily the PhD level scientists that are working on it every day, but have a little bit of an idea of what's going on and what might be other use cases and things like that as well.
we're clipping that last 2 minutes here. That should be sent and shared to every single person in sales. That was super valuable.
I think it's great. I'm going to play it to any sales team I run in the future, because often I'm always telling them this: you need to personalize, you need to make this valuable. And I think they look at you like, yeah, great idea, but I ain't got time for that. Sometimes, and they just go and carry on with their spray and pray. So it's a gold dust.
Yeah, it was awesome. Well, Jared, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time and talking with us today. And hopefully you get a lot of really good outreach from sales reps going forward.
Yeah, they'll have to beat that inertia. It's been great chatting with you guys.
Yeah. Have a good one. See you later.
Take care.